After weeks of controversy surrounding Bricks and Minifigs, often referred to as BAM, the company released a public statement laying out several different ways that it plans to improve, rebuild trust, and move forward. But here's the question. Who actually has the power inside BAM to make those changes happen, and who does the CEO, Ammon McNeff, answer to? And when you start asking that question, one name keeps coming up.
Reed Brimhall.
There is someone who has 51% of the shares.
Yeah.
That is neither one of the McNeff brothers.
Brimhall or whatever.
Reed Brimhall. We have analyzed the company documents. We have reviewed public reporting. We have spoken with multiple sources with direct ties to BAM. And we've been in contact with Mr. Brimhall himself. So today we begin the BAM Files, our 4-part investigative series into the questions that Bricks and Minifigs has not fully answered. Episode 1 starts with the ownership question. Who really owns BAM? And why exactly does Reed Brimhall's name continue to come up? Before we get into the documents, I want to be clear. This series is not about attacking local Bricks and Minifig store owners. A lot of them are small, independent business owners, and many may be caught right in the middle of a controversy they did not create. This series is about documents, sources, unanswered questions, and accountability. We're going to show you what we know, separate it from what we do not know, and maybe most importantly, give the people involved an opportunity to respond. I'll be walking you through the story and the documents, and Nick will step in with the reporting timeline, who we contacted, what questions were sent, and what answers we did or did not receive. BAM's recent PR statement lays out several promises, but promises only matter if we know who has the authority to make them real. Who has control? Who has voting power? Who makes the final call on litigation, public statements, franchisee communication, store transitions, and reform? That is why the Reed Brimhall question matters. First, the official document. BAM's 2026 franchise disclosure document, called the FDD, lists Reed Brimhall as Chief Financial Officer. That matters because this is not a rumor or a random online claim. This comes from BAM's own FDD. But the next line is what caught our attention. The FDD says Reed has been CFO of the franchisor and the franchisor's parent since June 2016. In plain English, the franchisor is BAM Franchising Incorporated. Now, a parent company means that some owner or entity is above it. And that phrase, the franchisor's parent, it's one of the reasons we started asking the questions. Because in another section, the FDD says BAM has no parents or predecessors required to be disclosed. Now, I'm not saying that that is a contradiction or wrongdoing, and there may be a simple explanation to that. But it does raise a fair question. If Reed Brimhall is the CFO of the franchisor and the franchisor's parent, what parent entity is being referenced? And who owns or controls it? The FDD also connects Reed Brimhall to the Boise, Idaho Bricks and Minifigs location. The listing says that location is owned and operated by an entity in which BAM's CFO is an owner. That does not prove that Reed Brimhall owns BAM Franchising, but it does show Reed is connected in two ways: corporate leadership and store-level ownership. And these things are really important when you're investigating who has the authority in a system. Then we found another public reference. A Profile magazine article about Reed Brimhall described him as part owner and CFO of BAM Franchising. That is important because it publicly supports the idea that Reed's role is not only financial leadership. It also points to an ownership connection. But let's keep this precise. Part owner does not mean majority owner, and part owner does not tell us who has voting control. So this doesn't settle the question, but it makes the question stronger. And before we go into what sources told EBN, I want to pause here and separate what the documents show versus what they do not show. Nick has been tracking the reporting side of this, so he's going to walk us through that line.
And this is where we want to be careful. The FDD documents Reed Brimhall's role as CFO. The Boise listing documents a store-level ownership. In the Profile magazine article, publicly describes Reed as part owner and CFO. But none of that by itself proves majority ownership or voting control. That is why the next part matters. What sources told EBN what we could verify and what we still could not confirm?
This is where our source work comes in. EBN spoke with Tavea Marconi, a former Bricks and Minifigs manager who worked directly for Reed Brimhall. Mrs. Marconi agreed to speak on the record for her own statements. She told EBN that Reed Brimhall represented himself to her as the majority shareholder or the majority owner. Mrs. Marconi had an hour-and-a-half-long interview with Nick, and here is that moment in their interview.
I don't have proof that Reed owns 60%, but he told me he owns more than 60%.
Okay. Oh, he told you himself. Okay.
Yes.
So that is Mrs. Marconi's account. We are not saying that we have independently proven Reed Brimhall is the majority owner. We are saying that an on-the-record former manager who worked for Reed told EBN that Reed represented himself that way to her. And that is why we asked Reed Brimhall directly. We also spoke with a source with close ties to Bricks and Minifigs. That source told EBN that veteran franchises have corroborated the majority shareholder claim. Again, that does not turn the claim into a public record fact. But it does mean that that information is not based on random internet comments or internet speculation. It is coming from people who, according to our reporting, have direct or close ties to the BAM system. Here is what we still don't know. Does Reed Brimhall own shares directly? Does he own shares through another entity? Does he have majority ownership? Does he have voting control? What is the parent entity referenced in the FDD? And who has final authority over litigation, board changes, franchisee communication, and reform? Those are questions, not conclusions. But this is where BAM's own public statement matters. BAM has publicly said that trust needs to be rebuilt, and its statement points to broader questions involving the franchise model, governance, legal strategy, and communication. So if BAM is asking the public, franchisees, and customers to trust that meaningful reforms are coming, then ownership and decision-making authority become fair questions. Not accusations, fair questions. Now, before we go any further, this is where the right to respond process matters. We have contacted Reed Brimhall directly, and he responded. We have also contacted Bricks and Minifigs Corporate. Nick has been tracking that outreach, and he's going to walk you through exactly what has happened.
Before publishing this report, we reached out to Reed Brimhall directly. Reed responded and asked us to send him specific questions. So we did. In that email, we asked Reed to clarify questions involving his role with BAM franchising, the ownership structure, whether he has majority or controlling ownership, the parent entity referenced in the FDD, and who has final decision-making authority inside BAM. Reed did respond and said, "Thanks for sending this. Let me study it a bit and I'll get back to you tomorrow." His response is important. It shows Reed received the questions. It shows he understood we were asking for specifics, and it shows he indicated he would review them. But as of our production of this video deadline, we had not received answers to the ownership and control questions submitted for this report. That is why this is not an ambush. If there's a simple explanation, we want to hear it. If there's missing context, we want to include it. And if Reed responds after publication of this, we will review that response and update our audience where appropriate. We also reached out to BAM Corporate on July 9th. EBN sent a detailed email to BAM Corporate Media and Legal Response Team. That email asked for clarification on issues involving Darren Hicks, franchise operations, store resales and transfers, franchise support, corporate decision-making, store closures, turnover, and alleged breach or default situations. The response deadline for that was July 13th. At the time of this publication, BAM Corporate has not responded to any of those either. So Reed Brimhall and BAM Corporate were both given an opportunity to respond before publication. And up to this point, we've gotten nothing else from them.
There is one more piece of context. The Bricks and Minifigs PR statement was posted on the night of July 10th. That very same night, EBN posted a video covering that statement and raising many questions. After that, EBN was provided screenshots that appear to come from an internal BAM-related Slack discussion. If you've not heard of the Slack system, that is the communication device used within Bricks and Minifigs. It allows franchises to communicate all the way up to the corporate office. We're not showing names or channel details or anything that could identify our source, but the screenshots appear to show an internal BAM-related discussion about EBN's coverage of the PR statement and the media request we had sent. One message shared with us appears to indicate that questions EBN sent to or about corporate staff were not expected to receive answers. Now, we want to be very clear. We cannot independently confirm whether those screenshots represent official BAM policy. We cannot independently confirm if every person in that discussion had final decision-making authority. But the screenshots are relevant because they appear to show that EBN's coverage, our media request, and the questions we sent were being discussed inside a BAM-related internal communication. And as of our production deadline, that media request has not been answered. This scorecard is not a verdict. It is a tracker. We can document Reed's CFO role. We could document the Boise store connection. We can point to a public article describing him as part owner and CFO. And we can report that sources raised the majority shareholder claim. We cannot independently verify majority ownership or voting control through the records we have reviewed. BAM says trust needs to be rebuilt, but based on the unanswered ownership questions, the unanswered media request, and the lack of clarification on who has decision-making authority, that trust rebuilding has not yet been demonstrated, and that is why ownership transparency remains unanswered. So here's the big question. Since BAM has publicly indicated that it is prioritizing rebuilding trust through honesty, accountability, and transparency, doesn't it seem appropriate for franchisees, customers, and the public to know who actually has control of BAM franchising? If the public is questioning decisions coming from the CEO, from corporate leadership, from the corporate office, shouldn't they also know who has the power to make changes necessary to restore confidence and rebuild public trust? And if customers, franchisees, and just viewers in general are questioning decisions made under BAM's current leadership, including CEO Ammon McNeff, then isn't it fair to ask a basic governance question? Who does the CEO answer to? That is why owner transparency matters. This isn't just about names on a paper. It's about power, it's about accountability, and whether all of these promised reforms that BAM has talked about is backed by real authority. Many viewers following this controversy have argued that BAM probably needs more than the 7 things they say they are going to improve in the latest PR statement. If that's true, then this whole question becomes even more important. Who is really in charge? And in part 2 of the BAM Files, we continue our investigation with the next important question in this series. How does the money actually move? Part 2 will feature documents, analysis, insider reports, and more interviews conducted by EBN. Episode 1 is about ownership and control. Episode 2 is about the system put in place beneath it. In part 2 of the BAM Files, we follow the money.